The final segment of the nephron is known as the collecting duct. So if this is our nephron, then this is our collecting duct. Now, the collecting duct extends all the way from the cortex of our kidney to the medulla portion of our kidney. And our collecting duct connects the distal convoluted tubule, this section here, to the ureter that basically extends from our collecting duct and into the urinary bladder where the urine is actually stored. So our filter travels from the distal convoluted tubule into and through our collecting duct into the ureter and then into the urinary bladder, and it is stored inside the urinary bladder until our body actually excretes it to the outside environment. Now, the question is, what exactly is the function of the collecting duct? Well, the collecting duct is involved in reabsorption, and we'll see what it reabsorbs in just a moment. So, under normal conditions, in the absence of any type of hormone, the collecting duct is impermeable to water, and that means no water is reabsorbed or secreted into our collecting duct. However, under normal conditions, it is slightly permeable to sodium ions, and sodium ions will be reabsorbed by our cells back into the surrounding tissue around our collecting duct, known as the interstitium. So about 5% of the total sodium ions inside the filtrate will be reabsorbed back into our body in the collecting duct. Now, as it turns out, the function of our collecting duct is actually controlled by two important types of hormones that we already spoke about. One of these hormones is ADH, the antidiuretic hormone, also known as vasopressin, and the other hormone that controls the functionality of the collecting duct is aldosterone. So under dehydrating conditions, that is, when the volume of water inside the blood plasma of our body is low, what happens is our body releases these hormones. It releases ADH and aldosterone, and these hormones act on our collecting duct to basically make it permeable to water. Now, the mechanism by which these two hormones actually act are different. So let's discuss how each one of these hormones affects the functionality of our collecting duct. And let's begin with ADH. So ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, essentially stimulates the epithelial cells found along our collecting duct to produce membrane protein channels known as aquaporins. And aquaporins are these specialized types of channels found on the apical side of our membrane that are responsible for actually allowing the movement of water across the membrane. Now, the question is, in what direction will the water actually flow? Will the water flow out of the filtrate and into the interstitium, or from the interstitium and back into our lumen of the collecting duct? Well, the answer lies in the following idea. Recall what the function of the loop of Henle was. In our discussion on the countercurrent multiplier system and the loop of Henle, we basically said that what the loop of Henle does is it creates a high concentration of ions, of solute ions, in the interstitium of our medulla. In fact, as we go lower along our medulla, as we go deeper into our medulla, the concentration of ions increases. Now, if we have a higher concentration of ions outside in the surrounding tissue than in the inside of the lumen of our collecting duct, then water will tend to flow from a concentration, from a lower concentration of solute to a higher concentration of solute, and that's because the osmotic pressure on the outside will be higher. So once again, ADH stimulates the epithelial cells to produce membrane protein channels known as aquaporins. These channels allow the passive transport of water down its gradient to the outside to our interstitium from the filtrate found in the lumen of the collecting duct. And this is because of the fact that the loop of Henle established this electrochemical gradient. It concentrated the interstitium so that there is a higher concentration, a higher hypertonicity in the outside than on the inside. Now, the next question is, what exactly is the function of aldosterone? So we saw that ADH is responsible for producing these aquaporins, and we'll discuss that in more detail in just a moment. But what exactly is the function of aldosterone? Well, aldosterone doesn't actually directly increase the flow of water from our collecting duct. What it does is it stimulates the production of sodium channels on the apical side of our epithelial cells. And the particular epithelial cells involved in this process are called principal epithelial cells. So if we produce more sodium channels on the apical side of the membrane, more sodium ions will be absorbed by the collecting duct. More sodium ions will travel out of our collecting duct and into our interstitium. Now, as a result of that, water will basically follow, because if we have more sodium ions flowing out, the concentration here will increase, and so water will follow as a result. And that's exactly what aldosterone does. So as sodium moves out of the lumen and into the interstitium, the surrounding tissue around the collecting duct, it also brings water along for the ride. Now, earlier we said that ADH, antidiuretic hormone, basically produces more of these aquaporin channels. The question is, how exactly does this actually take place? So let's take a look at diagram A. In the absence of the ADH hormone, water is impermeable. So basically water, these cells are impermeable to water. So if water tries to basically pass from the apical side to the basolateral side, it will not be able to pass across. However, notice what we have inside these cells. These purple vesicles are known as storage vesicles, and inside these storage vesicles, we have these aquaporins. So in the absence of ADH, we don't have any of these aquaporins on the apical membrane. All these aquaporin channels are found inside these vesicles. They're stored inside these vesicles. Now, if we look at diagram B, now we're basically adding our ADH. In the presence of ADH, antidiuretic hormone stimulates the transfer of these aquaporins from these storage vesicles and into the membrane on the apical side of the cell. And now, because we have these aquaporins, water can easily travel from a low solute concentration inside the lumen to the outside of our cell, on the other side, our surrounding tissue known as the interstitium. So this is the method by which ADH acts on our collecting duct and forces it to absorb more water. So let's summarize our discussion. So we see that the collecting duct is actually under the control of these hormones, ADH as well as our aldosterone. In the absence of these hormones, the collecting duct is impermeable to water, and only about 5% of the sodium, total sodium in the filtrate, is actually absorbed by the collecting duct. However, when we have the hormones present along this region, these hormones basically stimulate, they force our collecting duct to become permeable to water. And as much as 20% of the total water inside the filtrate can actually be absorbed under dehydrating conditions when the blood volume inside our blood plasma is low.